Aloha and welcome to the Secret Art of Huna podcast, where I'll be sharing how to use Huna, the carefully guarded spiritual, energetic and healing practices of the ancient Hawaiians, to help you transform those bits of your life that aren't working, to help you find your purpose, or maybe just to help you dump emotional baggage. I'm Dr. Jane Lewis, and 20 years ago I was burnt out, depressed, unfulfilled, disappointed, directionless and deeply, deeply miserable. Huna enabled me to change all that, and so I now share it with whoever wants to experience a more joyful, fulfilling life. Aloha, and welcome to the Secret Art of Huna. And today I'm going to be talking about spiritual awakening. So why talk about spiritual awakening? Why is it important? Well, I think it's important for a number of reasons. One is that while for some people their spiritual awakening is very easy, it's very smooth, for others it comes with a lot of trials, a lot of testing. Sometimes it can look like mental breakdown. And it's important to be able to distinguish where there is actual mental breakdown and where it's a case of spiritual awakening. Sometimes it can happen very young. I think that for some of the teenagers today who are experiencing feelings of being suicidal and uncertain, I think for some of them it's possible that it's a very early spiritual awakening. And certainly for young people in their 20s and 30s, because it's not a topic that people talk about a lot. It's many people assume that it never happens. If you're an atheist, you'll definitely assume that it's not going to happen. And therefore, we don't talk about it a lot as a society. But for some people, it's a real experience. It's something they feel quite actively and strongly in their body. So I think it's important to talk about it. One of the best books on the subject is called In Case of Spiritual Emergency. It's not a great read, but it covers a lot of the ground. So it's something that I recommend to people if they're going through some of the experiences that the spiritual awakening can bring. So some people, when they start to become spiritually awakened, they experience a lot of energy in their body, a lot of even vibration. For some people, it may even be sudden migraine, sudden physical symptoms of discomfort that they can't really deal with, something about energy moving. In the Eastern tradition, they talk about the Kundalini rising. And from an Eastern perspective, spiritual awakening happens when the Kundalini starts to rise up the Sushumna, the spine. And the energy rises from the base chakra, the root chakra, which is in the base of the spine. And as it rises through the different chakras, if you have blocked energy in any of the chakras, then this can cause real emotional disturbance, physical disturbance, mental disturbance even, because the blocked emotions, the blocked energy suppress the rising of the Kundalini force. And if the Kundalini force is rising strongly, then something has to give. So from a chakra perspective, it's important to free off the different chakras, whether it's through doing emotional release work, physical release work, maybe with massage or energetic release work, to free off the energy in the different chakras so that the Kundalini energy can rise more easily. A lot of the mystics and visionaries who've experienced spiritual awakening, they talk about losing their sense of consciousness, losing their sense of time, losing their sense of who they really are. Some of them hear voices, which very often it's the voice of God or it's the voice of a spirit, it's the voice of the divine. And some of them, it's a desire not to eat, a desire to really change their normal everyday patterns of behavior. Some people experience it very much as a change in temperature. Their body's too hot, it's too cold. Not to be confused with the menopause, although spiritual awakening can happen at menopause time. For me, my own spiritual awakening really came when I was in my 40s and I'd gone through the clinical depression piece. And as part of my recovery from clinical depression without the benefit of drugs, I looked for different options and found myself drawn to NLP and then to Huna. So I stepped into the Huna path. So the business of really awakening wasn't that uncomfortable, but the predecessor, the time up until I discovered Huna and then started to resolve my own sense of spirituality, was deeply, deeply uncomfortable. I don't recommend clinical depression to anybody. It's not fun. So sometimes in life, and it's not the explanation for everything by any means. And of course, for people who don't believe in spirituality, for atheists and for humanists possibly as well, and some agnostics, then this whole idea of spiritual awakening doesn't happen. It can't, because if there's no such thing as spirit, if there's no such thing as divine, then how can it awaken in you? But for people who do believe in it, and it is something of their truth, then the spiritual awakening process, it can be really, really important to work with it, to start to understand your own cycles and rhythms so that you get the feeling of when you're really out of kilter. It's useful to talk to a therapist, a counselor, a spiritual director, somebody who is trained in the idea of spiritual awakening and spiritual emergence, because spiritual emergency can look very much like a mental health crisis. Mental health's getting better. A lot of the institutions now are aware of the concept of spiritual awakening, and they may not treat somebody who feels that it's a spiritual experience in the same way as somebody for whom it's a clear case of psychosis. But the boundary between the two can be very, very fuzzy. So spiritual awakening can be truly, truly beautiful. It's not always uncomfortable. And of course, we start to question, we start to wonder, we start to explore. And as a result of those questionings and explorings, then the awakening becomes deeper, it becomes greater. So it can be a really beautiful experience. But sometimes it's not the easiest experience. And sometimes you have to cut yourself a bit of slack and accept that, yeah, I'm emerging spiritually. So give myself this opportunity. But the big question is, if you do experience, as I say, a change, a real change in your energy, that you start to feel fired up and it's uncomfortable in some way, or you feel a disconnect with reality, talk to a doctor, definitely, but also ask yourself that question: could this be part of my spiritual awakening process? Hope that's been useful. And I'm introducing a new course on spiritual awakening very soon, about what it's about, what are some useful concepts to take on board in order to accelerate your spiritual awakening. So look out for those, because they'll be available shortly. Meantime, have a look at the Forgiveness Challenge. We're upgrading it and changing it and improving it. And I think it's going to be a really, really great new product once we've done that. So look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Bye.
I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. If you want to bring about rapid transformation in your life, check out secretartofhuna.com, where you can also download a free meditation to help you with self-forgiveness. You can also look out for Secret Art of Huna on social media such as Facebook and LinkedIn. Look forward to talking to you again very soon.